Welcome back to the Garden with Joy and Holly radio show. Jennie Romer moments away. But first, you got Japanese beetles flying around. Rescue has a product that can help you fight that battle.
Yeah, Japanese beetle traps, when used properly, draw beetles away from your plants and trees. The trick is to hang them 30 feet from your plants you want to protect. That way you lure the beetles away from the areas that you don't want them.
Here, beetle, beetle, beetle.
And where they can cause damage, and you trap them. Rescue Japanese beetle traps are the only traps with a controlled release lure that lasts the entire beetle season. Their extra large bag is welded directly to the trap and stays put even when it's full of beetles. And the Rescue Japanese beetle trap is the only trap with a reusable bag that opens and closes. So if beetle season is a big season, you can go ahead, open the bag empty, and keep trapping beetles with the same trap. You can find all Rescue products at rescue.com. They're made in the USA.
Holly, let's go to the hotline and bring in our guest for this week.
Jennie Romer is a lawyer, a sustainability expert, and author of Can I Recycle This? Jennie has more than a decade of experience as an attorney and sustainability consultant fighting for effective legislation on waste reduction and single-use plastics. Welcome to the program, Jennie.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we thank you for taking time out of your day, not only to educate, and I think we're all going to get educated, Holly and myself, but all of our listeners across the country. And we'll start with this. What is a sustainable expert?
Well, a sustainability expert is someone who is specialized in issues relating to the environment, specifically avoidance of the depletion of natural resources and maintaining an ecological balance. And that can mean a lot of things because there are a lot of parts to sustainability. But my focus is on reducing plastic pollution. And I'm an expert in laws aimed at reducing plastic, particularly plastics in the ocean. And I'm a legal associate at the Surfrider Foundation's Plastic Pollution Initiative. That's a nonprofit started by surfers to protect the ocean, including keeping plastic out.
So, in a nutshell, you try to create laws or work with companies to minimize the amount of one-use plastics that they produce?
Right. And other packaging, but mostly plastic.
Okay, so we all know single-use plastics are quote-unquote bad, or we should all know that. But why are they so bad, aside from the fact of the waste they produce? Why are they so bad?
So at my job at Surfrider, we look at plastic pollution through the lens of ocean protection, keeping plastic out of the ocean. It's not only bad for the animal, the ocean life, but microplastics plastic degrades into smaller and smaller bits, and it can be ingested by animals and then kind of make its way up the food chain to humans. But then plastic is really harmful throughout its life cycle to the environment and to human health. So from where it's extracted, with fossil fuels are extracted, all the way to disposal, where a lot of the time plastic ends up in our environment. There's greenhouse gases and issues at every step. And only 9% of plastic ever produced has been recycled. And a lot of it really wasn't recyclable in the first place. So there are a whole lot of issues with plastic. And if we don't do anything about it, if we kind of keep going how we're going now, by 2050, there's expected to be more plastic in the ocean than fish by weight if we don't make major changes. So that's a big deal.
Now, like you said, not all plastic is recyclable, and only 9% of all plastic has ever been recycled. Does that have something to do with how it was manufactured? Because we know there's 1s, 2, 3s, up to 7s on the little triangle on the plastic. Does that have anything to do with the lack of recyclability and only 9% being recycled?
Yeah, that has a lot to do with it. So generally, the chasing arrows, the little symbol you see on the bottom of your plastic containers, those are resin codes. So there are 6 main types of plastic resins, and then number 7 just kind of means other. And generally, the lower numbers tend to be a more recyclable type of plastic. So number 1 and number 2 bottles and jugs are there's the most market demand for those. Recycling is a commodities market, and it doesn't really work unless there's some manufacturer who wants to buy that material to turn it into something else. So number 1s, number 2s are valuable companies want to buy those. They number two, bottles and jugs are worth about $1,000 on the commodities market. But the other stuff, the kind of number 3 through 7, we call them, all that other plastic is really low value, and companies don't generally want to buy those, particularly number 6. It's polystyrene, and that's something that really we don't manufacture things domestically here. Our companies aren't buying that and making new stuff out of it. So I really want people to think of recycling a little bit differently and not just kind of think all plastic is the same and put it all in your bin and not really think about it, but pay a little bit more attention. But I don't want to put it all on the consumer, the individual. It really needs to be companies that are making this stuff thinking about it a lot more on their own and also through policies.
And kind of basically like anything in life, it's a money game. If there's money to be made, they're going to make a move and recycle it to make more money. If it's not, they're going to kick to the side and go with something that can make them money.
Yeah, and so right now, municipal recyclers, so those are, your city government or the company that picks up your recyclables, they're getting a lot of that low value stuff that isn't worth anything. And so that's a big problem for recycling because it doesn't really work if it's not worth any money. But most people don't really think of it. They just think of recycling as more of a kind of a do-gooder activity rather than something that's really a commodities market. And so I think that's just a shift in how we think about these things.
Yeah, that's definitely very important for people to keep in mind. So, why don't you tell us about your work in reducing single-use plastics from more of like the legal, legislative points of view?
Sure. So I started with this back in law school in San Francisco, about almost 15 years ago. And at that time, San Francisco was passing a plastic bag law. And I wrote a law journal article about it. And it turned out that the plastics industry started spending a whole lot of money going to each individual city or town that was going forward with the plastic bag law and threatening to sue. So I started following that pretty closely, and I created a website about it. And I decided that I wanted to be the national expert in plastic bag legislation. And I didn't have much competition, so I eventually became the expert in plastic bag laws and kind of figured out what works and what doesn't. The plastics industry started suing, and so I figured out, how to make all these laws better, more effective, to make sure that we're really making something that's better for the environment and avoiding those lawsuits. And so now I work as an attorney for the Surfrider Foundation, and I work not just on plastic bags, but on foam foodware, reducing straws, like making them upon request, so you don't automatically get them all the time, and things like bottle deposits. And now we're talking about policies that go beyond just kind of those individual items, and talking about policies requiring that manufacturers pay for the recycling and the disposal of that single-use packaging. So that way they have to take some accountability and start making out of using less material and making it the packaging out of material that's actually recyclable so that it can be recycled.
And how receptive are these companies if they think that they're going to have to pay on the back side? Are they willing to look at other more biodegradable, natural means of making product?
Yeah, so the companies are definitely starting to come to, the negotiating table now. This is something that, a couple years ago, no one was really talking about very much in the U.S., but it's something this is something that's going forward in Europe and in parts of Canada and Asia. But just in the last couple of years, it's been something that's been moving forward, and now companies are starting to talk about, exactly what they feel they would be responsible for. They're more likely to make kind of voluntary commitments and stuff like that. But just this month, the state of Maine adopted the first, we call it extended producer responsibility, or EPR. It's kind of a wonky term, but we call it EPR for packaging. So that means that those manufacturers will pay for at least part of the recycling and cleanup and disposal. And so Maine is the first state to adopt this. We'll probably see quite a few other states do it. So that's a pretty big deal, and shifting that, because really our municipal recyclers that are handling all this stuff are losing a lot of money. And so a lot of the push is coming from environmentalists, but it's also coming from our local governments that say, hey, this is not fair that we are having to, instead of making money from selling our recyclables, or having to pay to send all of this to landfill because it's not valuable. So that's a big deal, and it's something we're going to probably hear a whole lot more about soon.
Fantastic. So we were talking with Jennie Romer. She's a lawyer, sustainability expert, and author of Can I Recycle This? So your book is Can I Recycle This? Please tell us, our listeners, more about it and why they should check it out.
Sure. So I guess the first thing I should say is this is an illustrated book. So, I'm talking here a lot about policy, but the book itself is really just explains how our recycling system works after you put things into your recycling bin. What happens next? How is it sorted? And I go through and the commodities market, and I go through 60 different items. And like I said, it's an illustrated book. They're beautiful watercolor illustrations, so it's something you can just kind of pick up and take a look at a few pages. You don't have to, sit down and read the whole thing straight through. So I encourage people to pick it up.
Well, we know recycling, as we've talked about, isn't great as people think it can be. Tell us some recycling truths that may be surprising to us.
Sure. So I always tell people to follow the kind of old mantra of reduce, reuse, recycle. So don't think of recycling as the first thing to do. Try reducing or reusing first. But I think the main thing with recycling, the truth is that, like I said, it's a commodities market. And so some things are very valuable, and those are the ones that are going to be consistently very likely to be recycled into something else. So something like an aluminum can or or cardboard. Those are things that consistently have a market. And so looking at it that way of like, oh, is this a valuable thing versus something like, a party cup, or a straw. Those things are not going to be recycled into something else, unfortunately.
Well, and we've all gone to stores, and Holly and I are guilty of this. These single-use plastics are made and wrapped around products that nobody in the world needs, and we buy because that's cute or whatever. It's stuff that never should have been made in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so hopefully with these EPR for packaging laws, right now there's really no incentive for a manufacturer to just not use the cheapest available packaging and to wrap everything in plastic. So hopefully we'll see those, put some disincentives in place and make it easier. And also to not get everything wrapped in packaging. But also I really want to see a shift towards refill and reuse. So to be able to walk into the store and purchase items, bringing your own bag or jar, and make it easier. So a lot of people do that at co-ops, but making it much more mainstream.
Make it a habit, not a problem or a whatever, like, oh, I got to do it, but make it a habit, like, oh, I get to do it.
Yeah. I want to shift that mindset a bit. And, it shouldn't be our fault. We shouldn't have to go out of our way to try to do these things. It really should be something that's coming from the manufacturers and having a better system for us.
I certainly agree. So that being said, I know like Joey and I both use a lot of reusables, whether it be water bottles or coffee cups or coffee mugs, whatever. So, you talked about the number 3 through 7. What are things that we could make easy shifts in our lives where they are reusable and help reduce those higher number plastics?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one big thing is food containers. So, a lot of people get takeout food, and a lot of takeout food containers are not recyclable. And so trying to what I try to do is to bring my own container, and if a restaurant will let me, and and have them put my food either on their plate and I slide it into a container, or have them put it in the my container themselves, or just doing things like avoiding as much single use plastic as you can. So it sounds like you're already doing the bags and bottles and cups, but making I try to carry around my own fork, a little utensil set with me, because utensils really are have a hard time, but they can't make it through the sorting machinery, and they're generally made out of number 6 plastics. So that's something that's not going to be recycled, and we can, that's enough. The next thing to try to avoid on my list.
That's definitely, I'm sure, something that a lot of people have not thought about is, their to go waste with the forks and spoons and whatnot. Well, Jenny, we really
Hmm.
appreciated having you on the program. How can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, you can go to my website, jennyromer.com, or canirecyclethisbook.com. You can also check out surfrider.org.
Well,
And
Jenny,
thanks so much for
yeah,
having me.
absolutely. A lot of knowledge you've dropped on us, that things that many people may have thought they knew or had heard in passing, but never put much thought to it.
Yeah. Well, definitely check out the book. I try to make it as approachable as possible, and actually a little bit fun to
A-
learn about recycling.
Absolutely. Well, Jenny, we thank you for your time. Hey there, gardeners. Thanks for checking out this segment of the Gardening with Joey and Holly radio show. If you like what you've seen, you can search through the channel and find full in studio videos of the entire show. If you want to go another route, you can search for it on your favorite podcast platform by searching the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener radio show or the Gardening with Joey and Holly radio show, and you can download it and take it with you. You can check out all past seasons at our website, thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com, under the radio tabs at the top of the page. We thank you for joining us. We hope you've learned and enjoyed the show, the segment, and we'll see you next time.